Amen, and blessed be. In the spirit of freedom, our theme this morning is reproductive justice, on the heels of the anniversary of Roe v. Wade this week. I'd like to read excerpts from a statement of conscience, and in my sermon I'll unpack a little bit more what that's about. Listen to these words from the 2015 Statement of Conscience from the Unitarian Universalist Association. I note you've got a website link in your order of service if you want to read the whole statement. As Unitarian Universalists, we embrace the reproductive justice framework, which espouses the human right to have children, not to have children, to parent the children one has in healthy environments, and to safeguard bodily autonomy and to express one's sexuality freely. Reproductive justice is a term created by women of color in 1994 to center the experience of the most vulnerable and to bridge the gap between reproductive rights and other social justice movements. We, as Unitarian Universalists, declare that all people have the right to self-expression with regard to gender and sexuality, and the right to live free from sexual violence, intimate partner violence, and exploitation, including sexual and reproductive exploitation. The world we envision includes social, political, legal, and economic systems that support everyone's freedom of reproductive choice and expression of gender identity and sexuality, especially the most vulnerable and marginalized. In such a world, all communities are places of equality, abundance, and safety, free from violence, oppression, and hazardous environments. This world includes access to safe, affordable, and culturally and developmentally appropriate childcare and healthcare. In our vision, everyone has access to accurate information about sexuality and family planning, and safe, healthy, and culturally sensitive reproductive health services. Some words from the Unitarian Universalist Association in 2015. Especially in this last week, I've been getting lots of emails with the heading, "What if Roe were to fall?" Which initially was the title I gave this sermon, but it seems to me a more apt title might be, "How do we keep Roe from falling too far?" By Roe, of course, we mean the Supreme Court decision on January 22nd, 1973, which ruled that women have a constitutional right to choose their own reproductive health. Most pointedly, the choice to terminate pregnancy or not, as per the dictates of their own conscience. 47 years ago this week, this landmark decision, arguably as monumental as that civil rights march of the 1960s that Jim Kalish talked about. The Roe decision overrode various state and national prohibitions against abortion and set off inflammatory partisanship in political, ethical, and religious life. Let's consider Roe this morning in the context of integrity, our worship theme for January. And Jim's just come back into us. Jim, I just gave you a shout out. Roe engages deep ethical and religious issues. The topic, I realize, may be touching some of us in this room in very personal ways. My friends, know you are not alone this morning, if indeed something is being touched in you. Know you are with a community where there is love and support. Know you are not alone as you listen to this sermon. At the start, let's clarify vocabulary. Something I learned during my time working as a chaplain for Planned Parenthood of Austin, Texas, a decade ago. I came to realize how much vocabulary can be twisted to support political views. So let us be reminded that pro-choice, the position defined in the UUA Statement of Conscience I read, does not mean pro-abortion categorically. Pro-choice means freedom for individuals to make their own decisions about their reproductive life. And choosing abortion does not mean being against life or being against pro-life. UUs have deep reverence for life and strive for the highest quality of life, life well lived in relationship with others. Roe v. Wade involved a mother of two named Norma McCarvey, Jane Roe, as she was identified, who wanted to abort a third pregnancy. She lived in Texas, where abortion was illegal under all circumstances. She found two young lawyers, Sarah Weddington and Linda Coffey, and I had the pleasure of interacting with Sarah Weddington a few times during my work in Texas. They filed a suit against a local district attorney, Henry Wade. The case moved up to the Supreme Court, which ruled 7-2 in favor of Roe, on grounds of a woman's right to privacy in the deeply personal act of discerning pregnancy. The decision meant millions of safe and legal abortions, and mortality rate dropped significantly from abortion. Why do we consider reproductive rights in a religious setting? And particularly in this liberal religious setting of Unitarian Universalism. It sounds like it's a political issue, right? Well, we consider Roe here because its subject matter is life, a deeply religious, perhaps ontologically religious theme. Indeed, the scope of religion is that all life, as humans develop awareness of what it means to be alive, is the definition of religion. Religion, religio, those universal questions about existence that all humans share together. We also consider Roe here today because you just heard that reproductive justice is a recent statement of conscience of this denomination. Every 2 years, the UUA General Assembly approves a social justice topic for 4 years of study. Then that topic becomes an official statement of conscience. That is a high-level position which the denomination then promotes in its interactions all around the world with other religious groups, with other organizations. The current statement of conscience is our democracy uncorrupted. And you can guess when we got an idea to develop that topic. Our democracy uncorrupted is what our current statement is. But previous topics have included economic inequality, immigration as a moral issue, and ethical eating. In the past half-century, reproductive rights and justice has also appeared several times in other official social justice positions. Indeed, Unitarian Universalists have been in the forefront among people of faith supporting reproductive rights. And in fact, back there in Texas in 1973, it was the Unitarian Universalist Church of Dallas, Texas, which was helping to support Sarah Weddington in the lawsuit and also serving as escorts for women visiting abortion clinics. Our Dallas church was central in that lawsuit back in the 70s. As you heard, this statement of conscience goes beyond abortion. The commitment to reproductive justice encompasses all of life: bodily integrity, personal privacy, and freedom of choice for all genders, all sexual orientations, all ages, all classes, and all races. The statement of conscience is grounded on the first principle of Unitarian Universalism: respect for the inherent worth and dignity of each person. And I remind you, especially newcomers, our principles and purposes are on the back of your order of service. UU's commitment to multiple theologies makes free faith particularly suited to supporting persons with a wide range of opinions about reproductive justice, particularly abortion. As chaplain at Planned Parenthood, my grounding in individual conscience and respect for all theological positions made me a good fit for this role of community ministry, which served a wide range of religious positions. One day, a Hispanic woman was there for an abortion. She asked me, would God hate her for killing her baby? My universalist reply, that God loves us all, and no, she would not be damned by God, was reassuring for her. Not to mention a new concept, that God loves all of us. Even as reproductive justice is deeply personal and religious, it may be the arena most subject to the most political interference and positioning. As we've seen, Roe was a decision of the highest court in the land, and faithfulness to overturn Roe when the opportunity arises may have been the single greatest factor driving the choice of the last two appointees to the Supreme Court, Justices Gorsuch and Kavanaugh. What is it about reproductive justice that generates such intensity? Well, the subject matter is the sacred condition called life, and existential questions such as when does life begin? But still, it's curious, the wide range of interpretation of what it means to be pro-life. Some who oppose abortion take life no further than birth and won't support nurturing the development of that life to provide the support needed to enhance the quality of new life. Is it really the sacredness of life that drives opposition to abortion? Instead, I clearly view the politics of reproductive justice through a lens of power drawn by gender lines. The act of biological reproduction is by definition an act defined by gender. Thus, control of reproduction becomes a means of control of women. This ongoing chipping away at Roe since 1973 represents an attempt at control over women and their bodies, defining their role as childbearers and that wished-for lack of power over their own bodies. Opposition to abortion disavows a woman's integrity, her wholeness, her capacity to guide her own destiny. It's no coincidence, as I read it, that Roe was passed on the heels of second-wave feminism of the 1960s, and the recent clamping down on the law is related in part to uppity protests from groups such as the Me Too movement and these various women's marches that have been held in the last several years. It's clear there's a connection between the two risings of intensity. Abortion certainly didn't begin with Roe. Even as some politicians play on fear conveyed by a simplistic premises that while Roe is legal, abortion is available, and as soon as Roe is out, or fallen, abortion will end. It's not nearly that simple. Access to abortion is not so dualistic. Women have always had abortions. The fall of Roe would mean abortion would be less safe and available, but it won't go away. The history of abortion in this country has many ups and downs. It's been here for a long time. Reproductive health care has been around since at least revolutionary times. And abortion was legal under various conditions, such as in the early 19th century, abortion was legal up to the time of quickening, as it was called, or the capacity to feel a fetus. By the mid-19th century, the broader practice of birth control, of which abortion was one component, was well studied and practiced. There are scholars of abortion history. Some of you know about my research on a mid-19th century woman minister named Lydia Jenkins. Lydia practiced an alternative medical practice called water cure. Different techniques in water cure, that is going to places where there are springs and taking the waters, as it was called. Different techniques in water cure were used both as deterrents to pregnancy and to encourage fertility. And when a woman of means attended water cure spas for several weeks on end to cure their various physical ailments, a side benefit, as expressed by the women's rights activist Elizabeth Cady Stanton, was a reprieve from demanding husbands. So to lengthen the time between pregnancies. Stanton, by the way, had 7 children. As controversy over abortion grew, by the 20th century, there were more laws restricting abortion and contraception. Margaret Sanger opened the first birth control clinic in Brooklyn in 1916 and was indicted under the Comstock laws, which forbid the mailing of obscene materials, which birth control was considered to be. Through the 20th century, as abortion became more controlled by the legal system, unsafe abortion escalated. Some may have seen an episode of Call the Midwife, that is a British public television series about public health midwives in London's East End in the mid-century. A recent episode of Call the Midwife featured a story about when the aunt of one of the lead nurses botched a backroom abortion, of course before abortion was legal in London, botched a backroom abortion which led to the death of the patient. Stories of botched abortions abounded in mid-century. Perhaps some in this room may be known among you and are present in your thoughts this morning. Even as Roe made abortion safer, there have been challenges to the law's authority since the get-go, since 1973. Roe hasn't fallen in 47 years, but it sure has been knocked around a good bit. On the national level, for example, the Hyde Amendment of 1976 disallowed funding for abortion through Medicaid. The appointment of Antonin Scalia to the Supreme Court in 1986 set in motion a trend still spiraling upward today of justices with staunch, singular anti-abortion positions. Not that we haven't seen other staunch opinions in the government recently. This national lens may cause us to miss the influence of legal pressures at the state levels and at the various laws in the various states. Even as Roe hasn't officially fallen, in some states, practical access to legal abortion is all but ended, requiring women and families enough hoops to jump through to be a real deterrent to go through with an abortion. For example, the requirement of spousal or parental consent forms and notifications. or 24-hour waiting periods between requests for services and any given procedure. In Austin, we had a 24-hour rule for folks who were coming in for the morning after pill. They had to come in once, come back 24 hours later to actually get the pill. A required ultrasound, for example, some requiring women to look at the image of the ultrasound. A requirement that procedures must be done in hospitals, not in clinics, and if in clinics, that abortion doctors needed admitting rights in neighboring hospitals, which, if Catholic, for example, do not endorse the procedure. Closure of clinics for lack of funding may make the closest clinic hundreds of miles distant, requiring long, costly travel, especially challenging for patients of lower income. In Austin, my job as chaplain was eliminated because of grant funding, because the position of the funding agency changed the terms to say that anyone receiving the funding could have no association with abortion, even as my counseling of abortion patients was only a small component of my spiritual leadership. It's not only laws which have chipped away at Roe. There has been the personal haranguing. Patients having to endure protesters at clinics. In Austin, when Planned Parenthood was putting up a new surgical center, contractors chose to strike, interrupting construction, until strike breakers brought in materials and workers in the dark of night, those pickets like Jim was talking about. Since the beginning, there have been counter-protests to Roe. And just this past Friday, some of you may have seen in the news, the annual March for Life, which President Trump proudly attended. Much more serious, however, on the personal level, are the many attacks on abortion providers. At least 11 deaths since 1993. You may recognize some of these names. Dr. David Gunn in Pensacola. 2 more in that city the next year. 2 receptionists at a clinic in Brookline, Massachusetts in 1994. In 2009, Dr. George Tiller, as he served as an usher in a Sunday morning worship service in Wichita, Kansas. And in 2015, 3 dead at a clinic in Colorado Springs. Safety against intruders is critical, my friends. Safety against intruders is critical. Violence has also been close to home. In September 1993, at Planned Parenthood of Lancaster, which opened in 1972, an arson attack, one of a string of attacks against clinics around the country. The Lancaster branch, which was part of the Pennsylvania network of clinics, didn't even do abortions, but it was still the object of attack, which disrupted service for 5,500 patients using the clinic. Around the same time in Lancaster, a synagogue was desecrated, a lesbian bookstore was bombed. But the good news is that Planned Parenthood of PA remains vital. Recent estimates are it serves 40,000 patients annually. I'd be interested to know how many in this room support Planned Parenthood in one way or other, especially Planned Parenthood of PA. I knew I'd see a lot of hands. How many were around in 1993 for the arson? Good. I wouldn't mind talking to some of you later to learn more about that. And I know that this church became a haven for the clinic. Some describe overturning of Roe as a categorical end of abortion, when in fact the political and medical consequences are complex and varying by the state. I tried to tease out the conditions in Pennsylvania if Roe fell, but frankly, the complexities of legalities were quite a bit above my pay grade to analyze this. What is clear is that if Roe fell, pro-abortion states would jump into action to keep abortion alive. Some states would become abortion havens to counter the abortion deserts in other states. What are the obligations for people of liberal faith? Are you willing to get involved or to get more involved? Why wait until Roe could fall? Instead, let us work to keep Roe from falling or falling further. At minimum, you can give financial support to the many reproductive rights agencies, Planned Parenthood, the Center for Reproductive Rights, the Religious Coalition for Reproductive Choice, and much more. And supporting the 6,000 Unitarian Universalists from 40 congregations in Pennsylvania, we also have a state UU social justice network called UU Plan, which has a reproductive justice subgroup. So mark your calendars, my friends. On March 22nd, the chair of UU Plan will be here leading the worship service, not to talk specifically about reproductive justice, but you'll have a chance to speak with her about that and many other topics that UU Plan is addressing right now. We are called to trust in the integrity and capacity of women and families to make their own decisions in matters of birth control and abortion. As we sing our final hymn, "Comfort Me," let us expand our sensitivity to those around us in matters of this deeply personal topic of human reproduction. There are no easy answers, my friends. Even when abortion is what we want, it represents loss and grief. Even when I experienced a miscarriage several months into a pregnancy, it represented loss and grief. So as we sing this morning, may we send comfort to all those women and families who have chosen abortion. To all those women and families who have chosen to carry a pregnancy to term. To all those women and families who would like children but cannot have them biologically. To all those women and families who have lost pregnancy through miscarriage or lost children in their early years of life. As our hymn invites, may we find comfort as well as the hope to move beyond grief and loss, to be able to sing and to dance, so that we may all nurture well our souls on this journey called life. May all this be so.
We know